This clip is brought to you by SaveWithConrad.com.
Talk about the Billionaire Ted skits, because they start to air around that same time here in the first quarter of 96. How involved were you with those? Was Vince there for the filming of it? Did he just review the tape? This feels like something that would have just tickled him.
No, I wasn't there. I was only there for the Billionaire Ted and Huckster match. It is the only one that I had to be involved in. And the rest of those were a product of Chris Chambers and David Saadi that really masterminded those and came up with them and shot them from a guy that they had as at a party that did impersonations, and one of them was Ted Turner. So it was born out of that, out of a guy that they had met and used for some different things, and thought, this guy does a pretty funny Ted Turner. Well, by God, Billionaire Ted was born.
It came out a few months ago. I shouldn't say it came out. I was watching an old Raw on the WWE Network, which is now on Peacock. And I hear, Bruce, that you can sign up for just like $2.50 right now. Is that real?
That is real.
That's like the best value in the history of wrestling, I think. $2.
Yeah, pretty much, man. I'd grab it if I were you.
Yeah. Check it out, by the way. It's on Peacock. So anyway, though, there was something that ran at the end of a Monday Night Raw where Vince introduced an ad that he tried to run in the newspaper, the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, their financial section, and they both rejected it. So he was going to run a variation of that ad, but it was about, attention shareholders. Ted Turner has lost like $30 million of your money. Where'd that money go? How aggressive was Vince in real life? Not just on screen with the silly, funny, Billionaire Ted, but how aggressive was Vince behind the scenes in real life about battling for his company, attacking this billionaire Ted Turner?
Well, I think that any time that you challenge Vince and being the competitor that he is and just the human being that he is, he's going to fight you. He's going to do everything that he can do to survive. And this was an example of it. And you looked at the AOL Time Warner
merger that they're working on.
Yeah. And you look at TBS and you look at all this stuff, and lo and behold, you couldn't find WCW in there.
Right.
You couldn't find all those losses. You couldn't even find where that number would have even been mysteriously written off.
Right.
You know what I mean? Where
right.
you knew what the number was, and internally they sure as hell knew what that number was. So it was just a way to inform people and say, hey, you're going to do this. You're trying to put me out of business. They stated that they wanted to put us out of business. Let's go.
If you were going to armchair quarterback everything that was happening in this first quarter, do you think perhaps one of the reasons that the business was down a little bit and this WrestleMania was down a little bit is because Vince was so focused on what they were doing, and he should have perhaps focused that energy on what he was doing?
Hindsight being 2020, I wish that we had completely ignored them.
Yep.
Frankly. Because when we realized we're doing everything that we found the territory guys did. Everybody was worried about what Vince was doing and trying to battle Vince instead of taking care of their own home. And I think that we became not worried, but yeah, you start watching your competitor because the things that they were doing were making some noise. So if we had focused less on that and more on our own stuff, and what I mean by less on that, ignore it.
Right.
Completely ignore it.
Which has normally been the WWE way. Like you just
right. And I think that by doing it in a lot of ways, we gave them credibility and probably directed attention to them.
And a Vinceism is never let them see you sell. And now for the first time ever, he's selling a little bit.
Well, he's reacting for sure.
Right.
Yeah, definitely reacting. And I don't know that, again, when you look back at it all these years later, but then we persevered and
Oh, it worked out.
And
It worked
kept
out.
on. And again, when you look at the end story, it's you get refocused, you take your resources and do everything that you can to take care of your business and stop worrying about their business. You will persevere in the end.
As you were sort of giving your speech there about persevering, I remembered when we did live shows way back when, and we did one in Pittsburgh, and we had Mr. Jerry McDivitt join us, and he was doing a Q&A with the crowd, which in hindsight, can you believe we pulled that off? That's one of the craziest things we ever did. But one of the questions was about the whole Shawn Razor lawsuit. Not Shawn and Razor, but you know what I mean? The Diesel Razor lawsuit where the company was suing WCW for stealing their likeness. Well, eventually Turner settled, and he disclosed at our little meet and greet thing, yeah, we got $2 million out of that. And then a few months later, we used that same money to buy their whole company. And is that not it's unbelievable when you think about it. Let's talk about, go ahead.
No, it truly is. And it's kind of like, Crockett buying the TBS time slot, that, Saturday night time slot, and buying that, and Vince saying, okay, great. Hey, thank you very much. Cause we're going to use this to
on WrestleMania.
Yeah.
In hindsight, I'm glad you brought that up because that is something I've thought about recently. We just did that long form deep dive interview with Jim Crockett. And of course, unfortunately we lost him earlier this year, but we talked about that extensively, but my follow up that he couldn't really answer anyway, so I didn't bother asking is, and maybe you've asked, do you think Vince could have actually pulled WrestleMania off without that cash infusion of that extra $1 million? I've always sort of gotten the impression he was borrowing from Peter to pay Paul to make that thing happen. And that extra $1 million couldn't have come at a better time.
I think that it helped, but he definitely could have pulled WrestleMania off. Yes. WrestleMania was going to happen no matter what.
Right. We also know that Phineas Godwin is going to debut. Who brought Dennis Knight in? Tell us how that came to be.
Dennis was one of those guys, Tex Slazenger, that was always around and beloved by everyone. He had been in Florida, and I think he had worked WCW as well for some gigs and shit. But Tex was one of those guys that was always around and beloved by everyone. So whenever anything would come up, it would always be, hey, what about Tex? This was one of those as you're looking around going, hey, Tex is looking for a job. What about using something here? And Phineas Godwin was born.
Who comes up with PIG and HOG? Phineas Godwin and then Henry O. Godwin. So they're PIG and HOG. Whose silly shit is this?
It's their names.
Yeah, but is that a Vince McMahon thing?
That was probably a combination thing.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com.